All right, I want to start first by saying that I hope you guys are holding up all right. It's been a tough year so far, all right? I kind of made a joke with my husband that it was Kobe Bryant was guarding us from the gates of hell, and when he passed from our reality, all hell broke loose. So rest in peace, Kobe. It's been a wild ride. I want to follow up by saying that you guys need to make sure you stay on top of your mental health through all of this. It's very important. Very important that you stay on top of your mental health. Check in with your friends, check in with your family. Even if a person pops into your mind, they're popping into your mind for a reason. Text them, call them. Just make sure that they're okay. And it's not just what's happening right now. It's what has been happening, and it's been a pile on. It's been an accumulation of just one thing after another thing after another thing. And because whatever it is that's controlling the construct right now has done a great job of causing us to become so consumed by our phones, whether it's social media or just text messages or group chats or whatever, our phones have become more and more prevalent in our daily lives, so much so that especially now, like you sit in a room full of people and look around and we're all back sucked in, and it's just one video after another video after another video, or one meme after another meme after another meme. Talk to each other. I personally took the last 2 days off social media. I don't even use social media like that. Like, I noticed that when I did a scroll through Instagram, I started feeling really down, and I caught it and I exited out. That being said, I think in yesterday's episode before this episode, the one about all of this being a psyop, the psyop of structural violence and kind of breaking things down. I was reading, the book is called The CIA as Organized Crime. And in that book, it detailed all the atrocities that the U.S. government and the military and things like that have, organizations like that have done to people of color across the world. You know, we're talking about in Vietnam, talking about in the Middle East and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya. What they're doing now, I mean, they're just today bombing the Afghanistans again, or the Afghanis again, just today, this Friday. They're taking advantage of the chaos so that they can quietly kill other people of color. That's not okay. And as I'm listening to this, it was like you start to feel the immense pain that all people of color across the world that have been sort of afflicted by this level of hate, of white supremacy, of people, dangerous, violent, negative, evil people, for lack of better words. That's the only word that describes them, just who have no respect for another individual's life simply because of one little thing. Melanin. One little thing. And this organization has terrorized every ethnic group around the world. And as I'm listening to this book, I just start crying. Like, I just tears, it was just overwhelming. And I cried for like a good 40 minutes. Not like a blubbering kind of crying, just like a heartbreak, like a just intense heartbreak. Not for my people, not just for my people, but for all people of color. And you know, I kind of alluded to it in the previous episode, but it's always like an underlining theme in my episodes, which is this: we're all one. There's nothing wrong with saying that. It's not kumbaya-ish. It's not. We're all one, you know. And I think that the people who've been able to attack and get away with what they've gotten away with is because they've done an excellent job of dividing all of us. Okay? And it's not even just like a people of color thing. There are obviously European Americans and Europeans who aren't vicious, who aren't hateful, who do understand, who are kind and would never tolerate a lot of the atrocities that their governments have imposed on people of color, whether it's their military, through the might of the military, or through the might of their police force, or through the might of their intelligence agencies and things of that nature, whether it's putting drugs in their neighborhood, whether it's programming people to look at them as less than, because of their religion, because of their, ethnicity, because of where they come from, because of their gender, because of their sexuality. And they're able to get away doing that by keeping us fighting each other. Because if we're fighting each other, we never look up and realize that it's not us that's really hurting each other, right? There's something else that's pulling the strings. And you've been so programmed to think you're better than this person. Like, think about, you guys have listened to what people have said. We all have had this conversation this week. And granted, it's the conversation of the week that has been, triggered by the military, by the media. But it is one that we do need to have, All things considered, it is important that we have these conversations that have been going on. But think about what, like, for example, I had my Mexican friends telling me about how their parents were saying, well, when, Mexican people were kind of under the same kind of assault, more or less, we didn't riot. And then I have my Iraqi friend who's telling me that her mom is saying the same thing. Well, when we were being assaulted and bombed, we didn't riot. And the first reaction is to say, well, that's just white supremacy talking, because what you're doing is you're comparing and saying, well, more or less, that these people over here are behaving exactly in the manner in which they're described to behave. They're behaving like quote unquote animals. And you're also indirectly saying that somehow culturally you're better than them. And thankfully, both my friends checked their family members and said that that's not okay. Here's the other thing that kind of gets lost in translation there, though. While you're busy saying that we didn't riot and we didn't loot, besides failing to address the fact that there's some covert shit happening. There are organizations that are showing up dressed like protesters, impersonating protesters so that they can ramp up the chaos and destroy and cause violence to make the people who are trying to be peaceful look bad, right? So without, you're failing to address that. But the one thing that seems to get lost across the board is you guys are, all these cultures are failing to understand that you're being oppressed by the same person. I'll say that again. When a Mexican person says, well, when white people were putting our culture or putting our people and our children in cages, we didn't riot, right? And an Iraqi saying, well, when white people were bombing our countries, we didn't riot. Nobody's addressing the fact that there's a common denominator here, which is each and every culture has been attacked by a body, right? You're all being victimized. You're all being victimized across the board by the same entity. Right? The same psychopathic entity that made it okay. And before, I always have to say this because I don't want my white listeners to feel attacked, because I understand, like right now this week, particularly, it's probably been really difficult to see the pain that people of color are expressing and to understand that you have unknowingly sort of facilitated that and benefited from that. So I don't want my white listeners or any white person who at their core are genuinely good people, which I believe most people across the board are genuinely good people. I honestly think that if you look at the protests, you'll see about 90% of the people there are genuinely good people. And then there's just like the 5% of people who are just trying to, 5 to 10%, I don't know what the exact stats are, but there's just a small percentage of people that are there to cause chaos, and that's where all the attention goes. So speaking to white people, understand that just like what has happened with these protests, right? When it first started, people focused not on the 90% of the peaceful protesters who were showing up to speak out against an injustice, right? People instead focused on the rioters and the looters and then made those rioters and looters representative of the rest of the protesters. That's exactly the same thing that, quote unquote, white people is happening to them. So let's just say 80 to 90% of Europeans, both European Americans and, Europeans across the entire world, no matter what country they reside in, Australia, South Africa, England, Canada, the United States, are good people with good hearts. But there is like 10% of that population of people across the world that are sociopathic, that are extreme racists, that are white supremacists, that order bomb strikes on innocent people, that are okay with going into people's countries and fucking desecrating their way of life, desecrating their livelihood, desecrating their culture, enslaving them. It's a small percentage of people, but that becomes the focus because they're the ones that are causing the most chaos. They're the ones that are causing the most trouble. And so you guys can't get defensive when people say white people, because as you have noticed, it's been illustrated with the protests. You guys were conditioned to focus, it's human nature, to focus on the worst of any group. So the worst of white people are the ones that are pulling the strings, ordering drone strikes on children in the Middle East, right? Going into people's countries and completely destabilizing them and then invading and then taking their resources. It's the worst of you. But unfortunately, because they look like you, because they dress like you, they've infiltrated your culture, they give the rest of you guys a bad rap. Exactly like you've seen happen with the protesters. So I can understand wanting to get defensive because you think that it's quote unquote, like there have been white people who have become very defensive and said, you make it seem like it's my fault, like I should feel guilty for, my skin. And to that I say, first of all, that's how people of color feel all the time, that they should feel somehow less than because of the color of their skin. You've only had to kind of feel that feeling for like 3 days, 4 days, and a weekend. But that's how a lot of people feel about who they are as individuals their whole life. It's not to make you feel bad. It's just so that you can have empathy. That's it. You're still it's still your country. You guys are still the majority at this point. So you do have the ability to change it. Get it? So you're not, quote unquote, under attack, not in the way. Feeling bad by people calling out the behaviors of a small percentage of your entire population, I understand it, but it's not the same as people who have lost their homes, people who have become refugees, people who have been displaced from their continent, from their country, people who have lost their entire life savings, people who were doctors and lawyers and had to get upended, from everything they knew and run just to save their lives. So perspective. So I want to address that when I talk about white people. It's not comfortable to feel that way. I get it. But if you guys are genuinely trying to be, if you're open to change and to real equality, because honestly, you guys don't lose when there is real equality. Think about any time in history where humanity has decided to work together and not against each other. It always ends up being for the greater good. It always ends up benefiting all of us. So imagine a world where we're all treated as equal and we all have equal opportunities. Humanity as a whole can't help but be better, which means that your children and your children's children, one, won't feel the feeling and the guilt that you feel now. They won't have to, because they will know that their parents, their ancestors, did everything in their power to correct the wrongs of their ancestors. This generation can do that, right? So that's speaking to you. Now I want to talk back to my people of color. And when I say people of color, I mean melanated people across the world. Stop fighting each other. We're all black. Okay? So if you're African American, first of all, we're cousins. I'll say that right now. African Americans, you guys are just Igbo people. I'm Igbo from West Africa, Nigeria. You are my cousin. Your ancestors were taken from my kingdom, Biafra. Yeah. And they were stolen from the slave coast. That was West Africa. And then brought to this country. So any of you guys go and do a DNA test, you're going to test the same. Your blood test is going to be exactly the same as mine, more or less, give or take, some mixing here or there. But majority of your DNA is going to match mine. So you're my cousin. You're cousins. We're cousins. We're Igbo. You're Igbo. Okay? So hear that. They keep saying that you guys don't have a home. You guys don't know where you're from. That's a lie. That's a lie, and that's bullshit. You're from Nigeria. You're from Ghana. Exactly where they said the slave coast is. You just type in slave coast. Type in slave coast into Google. And that's where you are. Now, bear in mind that these countries, Ghana and Nigeria and things like that, there were the borders that were created by the Europeans. So they're fake borders. Before the borders were created to separate people, right, to cause disunity, they were all kind of together. They moved freely. So you're my cousins, okay? But African Americans, Native Americans, the same thing happened to you guys that happened to us, okay? Invaders came into your country, took your land, killed your people, enslaved them. Unfortunately for the Native Americans, a lot of them could not endure the indentured servitude / slavery, just a fancy word for saying slavery. So a lot of them died from the disease and things like that. And then the rest of them were relegated to the reservations. But you're black people. Okay? Same thing applies to the Aboriginals. You guys are black people. Melanated people who, same thing happened to you. People came to your land, took everything that you had, took your land, took your home, took your culture, then relegated you to the worst parts of your own country. You're black people. The same thing applies to the Iraqis. Same thing applies to the Iranians. The same thing applies to the Mexicans. All of this shit was yours. California, Texas. And then came invaders with sickness and disease. Made people war against each other, subjugated them, relegated them to what we see now. And A lot of what's happening right now in Mexico is a result of systemic oppression. You're Black people. Same thing happens to the Indians, the British and what they did. I could go on. You just have to open up a history book, and literally any history book you read is just a story of Europeans going into other people's countries and taking stuff. It's there. It's where it's there. Okay. So before you turn around and you point your finger at a person and say, I'm better than an African American, right? Oh, yeah. Sorry. I left out my Asians. Yeah. You guys aren't white. You're Black. Okay. So look at Vietnam War. Look at what happened to the Philippines. Look at what happened to Guam. Look at what happened to Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the same thing. When you look across the board at what we have in common and what separates us, you'll start to find that what is quote unquote, what we're called, which is quote unquote minorities, we're actually not minor. Especially once you stop taking upon yourself those bullshit labels and accepting the label of a minority, which, by the way, Google the definition of minor, M-I-N-O-R. It's right there. It literally, the definition of a minor is something that is inferior in importance, size or degree, comparatively unimportant, lesser, not the lesser of the two, a minor share, means small, means inferior. So when you are called a minority, first of all, it's a lie, because if you take all the melanated people, both in North America and around the entire world, there's nothing minor about them. They're actually the majority of people on this continent. So that's the first sort of deception. It's a type of hypnosis. So there's that. And then you look to see, what do you have in common? Because you can sit and say, well, we're not them. And I don't know. This is probably gonna fall on deaf ears. I'm fully conscious that some people might listen to this and not get it, but that's okay, because I'm talking to the people who are able to hear what I'm saying. The only way we stop this is if we unite. I'll say this again. The only way we stop this is if we unite. And not unite against anybody. That's just doing to others what was done to you. That's not okay. That comes with its own sense. It comes with its own set of karma. You don't want that. But just uniting and say, you know what? We're not going to tolerate this. I'm not going to tolerate my brother, my sister getting treated like this. So once again, not excluding white people. All I'm saying, actually, I should say, when I look to see, who was out there protesting, I see a very diverse crowd. And like I said, 90% of you guys are good hearts. And even when you engage in behavior that can be construed as racist, that is racist, a lot of the time it's something that's born more out of ignorance and a misunderstanding, as well as your programming that was done to you and a system of beliefs that you have, adopted and has been ingrained in your culture, the system of beliefs in white supremacy. And I get that. So deal with that, right? Work on that. And not just towards Black people or African American people, but just across the board, all people of color, and more importantly, check the 10% of the people that make the remaining 90% of the people, of white people, look bad, right? Address that. Like, for example, I think about all these instances that we've seen, like whether it's The young lady trying to sell bottled water, and that lady called the cops on her, or the Central Park Karen, who was clearly trying to weaponize her privilege and use the power of the state to shut down a man, an African American man, for daring to check her, right? If you are a white person and you're in a Central Park, which is a very, largely populated place, and you see something like that happen, check people like that, right? Step in and say, that's not okay. Don't just let him, don't let something like that happen. I think it was Martin Luther King that said, if you see evil happening and do nothing about it, you are just as guilty as the person perpetrating the evil. So check each other, all right? So yeah, that's just a very quick PSA, just to say, one, stay on top of your mental health. I guess I said all that to say this. Stay on top of your mental health, especially going into the weekend. There's, if you feel like you got to get on top of the news just to see what's going on, do that, but set a limit. Don't let yourself get sucked in. Don't let it consume your day, because this stuff does start to affect your health, not just your mental health. It starts with your mental health, but then it starts to drain you, and you start to feel lethargic, and you start to feel tired and not energetic, and then it slips into like a physical pain, right? So back pain, neck pain, just feeling weighed down, right? And then of course it can manifest itself into disease, and so really be mindful of that. You are doing the best that you can. I know that you guys all are. If you're protesting, if you're writing the state, if you are talking to people, your loved ones, if you are donating money to, the child of George Floyd, please look into all of these things. And if you have if you've become determined to make it so that the world that you live in is going to be a better world, not just for your children, but for all children, and that the future that you leave for your kids is going to be a future where everyone is treated as equal. You're doing the best that you can. We know there's a problem now. We've seen it. Well, I should say, you know that there's a problem now if you're a white person. You're seeing it. But there's some stuff that we're starting to see too as people of color. Like the things that I just pointed out to you. 34 years I went without stopping to think like, wait. That's not cool. What's happening to people in Afghanistan, because I got conditioned to think that, okay, well, they're terrorists. And as I got older, I started to realize, no, they're not terrorists. They're defending their home. It's their home. Somebody came into their home and started attacking them, and they're defending themselves, and they're called terrorists. That's not cool. And when I, as I got older, to see, a Mexican American person or a Mexican person kind of feeling like less than, I could resonate with that and say, that's not cool. You're a human being. Put your head up. If I can do that, so can anybody who's listening to this right now. So let's do that. It's the simplest thing in life is you sit and you watch animals, you watch birds, and they don't, you have birds of all these different feathers. And like pigeons even, they don't fight each other. They just, I think, recognize that they're all pigeons. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with human beings where, like, literally one stupid thing, the melanin content on your skin is enough to cause this much pain, to turn this beautiful paradise into fucking hell over skin color and programming and psychological warfare. If we have the power to make this world a type of hell, we have the power to make this world a type of heaven. It's a dual reality. Anything is probable. Everything is probable. Unite. It's really that simple. Unite. Start watching each other's backs. Start looking out for each other. You know? Be the person. And I'm not talking just Black people. Look out for Mexicans. Mexicans, look out for Middle Easterners. Middle Easterners, look out for Asians. Asians, look out for Black people. Like, just look out for people. In fact, like, get to the point where you're not even looking at the person's skin color anymore and just be like, that's a fucking human being. That treatment is not okay. We're all being subjugated by the same fucking psychopaths. And white people, you guys need to understand that the people who are pulling the strings, that are doing all this, that are pushing this agenda, that programmed you, the people who programmed you, who instilled in your mindset this system that has blinded you, that has hypnotized you into behaving in the way that you have in the past, don't feel guilty, feel angry, and then use that anger constructively to destruct the mindset, the paradigm that holds your brain together, that had made you live this way, and that now your eyes are open and you can see, oh shit, like I've been fucking hypnotized. The people who hypnotized you to think this way, they needed you to see things this way so that you could protect them while they continued to fucking rape, pillage, and destroy. They hypnotized you not to see, right? So that they can then hide behind your blindness and kill and steal and destroy. They walk in your skin, but they're not like you. So while we're all looking at different things, while we're all looking at, okay, well, you're this label and you're this label and you're this label, there's one label that they fall under, and they're just looking out for their fucking selves. They don't care about you. They don't care about, white, Black. They don't care that they are white. They don't care that they're American. They just care about power. And as I've been reading the news, I'm seeing more and more articles coming out saying that the greatest beneficiaries of both the lockdown and I'm sure what's happening now with these protests are going to be companies, are going to be corporations, are going to be the billionaires. The rich keep getting rich. I should say the rich keep getting richer. The billionaires keep getting billions. I think they said Jeff Bezos made $400 billion. Do you know how much 1 billion is? I alluded to that before in the previous episode. Google that shit. Just 1 billion. 400 billion fucking dollars. You can't spend that. And they're just sitting on that. While the rest of us are, they're looking at us and people who are running into stores and stealing stupid shit, right? And that's not okay. I'm not condoning that behavior. I'm not. But I'm saying looting $500 worth of stuff or $2,000 worth of stuff versus looting billions of dollars puts things into perspective. These people don't give a fuck about their skin color. This is a class thing. It's the haves versus the have-nots. And the majority of us are minorities to them because they have the majority of the money. So while we're over here fighting each other over dumb shit, even though we're all in the same fucking class, right? I know there's no billionaire listening to me talking right now. I know there's no billionaire listening to me talking right now. We're all in this together. We all got locked down. They didn't get locked down. If they did, they got locked down in their mega fucking mansions. And their private jets still allowed them to go wherever the fuck they wanted to go to. They're not living like the rest of us. And so we're fighting each other, even though we have more in common. My Iraqi friend has an Asian roommate, and they both are worried about how they're going to pay their rent because one of them is on leave and the other one has had his hours cut. And the Asian roommate's over there talking to her, defending the state. Hello? Defending the system. Hello? We're all in this together. We really, really do need to open our eyes. Some people have joked and said that this is the apocalypse. Google the etymology of the word apocalypse so you can understand what that word means. Apocalypse didn't initially mean it was the end of the world. It was a revelation. It meant to reveal. So you could start to see things for what they actually were. So if this is the apocalypse, then yeah, we're becoming to see, to be aware. It's an awakening. It's a consciousness to be cognizant of what has happened throughout history, throughout modern history, throughout our history as human beings. See it. Become aware. This is the awakening. Now that you can see, do something about it.